Hey, what's up? It's Jared with Ditch Auto, and today we're going to talk about 10 things that I think you need to know about the Canon EOS R, especially if you're considering picking one up or giving it a try for the first time. You know, I've spent a good amount of time with this camera. I've had access to one of these for the last several months. I took it on a 2-month traveling trip with my family and used it extensively, have used it in a couple of professional situations as well, shooting some client work, both on the photo and the video side. So I have a lot of experience with this camera, and there are some things that have really been just amazing, things that have shined with this camera, and then a couple of things that, depending on who you are and what your use case is, may maybe be downsides to the camera. So these are 10 things that I've kind of determined are things that are good to know about this camera, and I think will help you in making your decision on whether or not to go ahead and get one, or maybe it'll even just make you feel better about your purchase decision if you did get one already. So number one is just the lenses that are coming out for this camera are absolutely fantastic. Canon has always been known for producing quality glass for their cameras, but this new line of lenses is just absolutely fantastic. Some of the quality of the glass, of course, is just great. The lenses that they're putting out are fantastic, but they feel futuristic. They feel like what I would expect coming out now, as opposed to lenses that, yes, do a good job, but don't seem to have any new features or anything too exciting on them. These lenses are absolutely fantastic. They feel fantastic. They're built great, and the quality of images that people are getting, including myself, out of them is just amazing. So the lens that I ended up with first for this camera was the 2870 f2, which is just an amazing lens. It's a beast of a lens. It's absolutely large, but it's a beautiful lens, and it just captures amazing images. I absolutely love that lens. And still being a Sony shooter, it frustrates me that there isn't something as fantastic as that lens for Sony. It definitely makes me want to invest in an EOS R camera just to have access to that lens and utilize it, because that lens never left my EOS R. It's a lens that I used constantly throughout the entire trip for both photo and video shooting, and it's just a great lens. So the lenses that Canon is putting out for their mirrorless line is definitely something that is setting their mirrorless line apart from Nikon, who's been a little slow to release some lenses, and even Sony, who has a good lineup of lenses now with their G Master line, but you know, the lenses that they're coming out with are still pretty much expected lenses. They aren't doing anything to really push the envelope with their lenses. Yes, the G Master lenses are great, beautiful lenses, and I absolutely love them. But there's nothing like super, like new and exciting, like no new features or anything like that really from the lenses. So number two is just the ergonomics of this camera. Now, Canon has always had good ergonomics with their cameras. They've really felt good to hold. They're built like a camera that somebody is going to be holding on to all day long. I feel really secure when holding this camera. It feels good in the hand, you know, even though, especially with the lenses, the combination of holding the camera with the lens. Like every lens that I've had on the EOS R so far has just felt really good in conjunction with the camera body itself. The only thing that I have added is this M Plate Pro to the bottom, which really is just so that I can add a more balanced point of contact when I am using the camera on a strap. And then also, I just like having it there because it's good protection for the bottom of the camera. I'll link to the M plate down below, because I literally put it on all of my cameras, especially cameras that have a little bit heavier of a lens on them, because the mount point here, see how this hangs now? Nice like that, as opposed to if I had it back here, the strap, the camera would be tilted down. It's just nicer for me to have the camera nice and balanced when I go to grab it. So I put the M Plate Pro on there. But the camera itself, the ergonomics is just really good. It feels good to hold on to. You know, shutter button position is good. Most of the switches and rockers that are on the camera are just positioned really well. So the camera just feels good to hold in the hand. Now, the third thing is the autofocus. Now, autofocus, Canon really kind of set themselves apart when they started messing around with their dual pixel autofocus, and the dual pixel is actually really quite fast. Capturing images, autofocus just nails really quickly. You know, eye autofocus is a new feature to a lot of these cameras, and the EOS R does an okay job with eye autofocus. I am not a huge fan of eye autofocus because there's usually more than one person in my shots, and chances are the camera's gonna try and pull focus on the person that I didn't mind being slightly out of focus or that was in the background of the image. And so I tend to use selective point autofocus and move the pixel around to the point where I want autofocus to happen. And when I'm using selective point autofocus, it nails focus really fast all the time, whether I'm shooting photos or video. It just does an excellent job. So autofocus is really good, but as far as eye autofocus and some of these new kind of like AI type of features that are assisted with the camera, Sony really still kind of holds the leading position there. Nikon does a good job as well, but Canon and Nikon are still kind of neck and neck with that. But as far as grabbing focus onto something, this camera does an absolutely fantastic job at it. It's really quick. Canon has always been known for that, and nothing has changed with this mirrorless camera here. So number 4 is the experience with the EVF and the screen on the back. It's a great experience. It's got a very nice screen, both in the EVF and on the back of the camera here. Something that you should know about it that I think is really interesting, and I haven't seen this on any of the other cameras yet, is that when you rotate the camera and go into portrait view, all of the information that you're looking at, whether it be on the back display panel or in the EVF, rotates with it. Kind of like on a smartphone. When you rotate your smartphone, the camera and all the little dials rotate with it. When you rotate it back, everything is nice in the way that it should be so that it makes it easy to read and easy to see. It does that on this camera, which you'd think would just be something that should have been there all along on all of these cameras, especially mirrorless cameras, but not all cameras do that. So all the details, your metering, your shutter speed, aperture, all of the information that's going to show on the display, when you rotate the camera, all of that rotates with it. It's just a fantastic usability experience from my standpoint. And combine that with a really nice and bright screen on the back for previewing your images. Of course, this is mirrorless, which means you can shoot photos and you don't have to pull the camera down and look at the back screen. You can continue to look through the EVF and see that preview playback of your image. You don't have to look to the back screen. The brightness, of course, is really good. On very bright days, I had no problem seeing what was on the back of the screen. And of course, being that the EVF is there, if you're in really, really bright situations where it's just kind of hard to see what's going on the back of the screen, you have that EVF in there for your playback of your images, and it just makes it really nice to have that feature, which is a common feature of mirrorless cameras, but they do a good job of it here with this Canon EOS R. Another aspect is that it does have the flip-out screen, which everybody seems to like. I'm kind of impartial. I like the fact that you can go and shoot in selfie mode, that you can vlog or do whatever you want here, and that the screen is out of the way. However, for me, the screen gets in the way of the ports, so if I'm connecting anything to the ports, which with a camera like this, I'm definitely going HDMI out to an external recorder, and so if I'm trying to use this, maybe because I want the recorder facing back, but I want this facing forward, I've got ports in the way. If I'm shooting handheld and I want to be able to adjust this, the angle here, and I'm not shooting with something, but maybe just have like headphones in or something, or a microphone and headphones, then this kind of gets in the way and I have to like pull it around here and rotate it and then slide it in to wherever it'll fit. To me, that kind of is a little bit frustrating. Also, just for the way that my brain works and my eyes work and everything, I like to look straight down the center line of the camera to shoot my image or compose my shots. When my camera is pointed here and I have to move my eyes over here and look at this screen, which is also just a little bit tilted, it's not straight in line with the camera, it makes me have to think a little bit longer to compose my shot. And most of the time when I'm shooting, it is in situations where I have very little time to get the shot. Everything is very candid and happening really quickly, and so I have to be able to compose my shots and get everything right. And I find for shooting photos, when I'm utilizing the flip-out screen, I'm having to do more cropping in post-production. When I'm shooting video, it just, sometimes the angle is a little bit off until I spend a little bit more time making sure that's lined up. Just having the screen off to the side right there just doesn't work for me as well as having a screen that just articulates out from the back. Yes, there are trade-offs there, pros and cons. I think that you can agree to that. I would really like it if somehow this screen can articulate from this angle and then still have the option to pop out from the side, but I understand that that would be a little tricky to pull all of that off. The only way that you're going to get the screen to kind of pop out in an angle and articulate up is if it pops out to the side, which, you know, pros and cons, pros and cons. Number 5 is a feature of the lenses that Canon is developing for this camera, and that is the control ring that is customizable on the front of the camera. This is what I was talking about as far as adding technology and making these cameras more interesting and useful and feel more futuristic. Canon not only has just made some beautiful lenses that are amazing and look modern, but they added a third ring to the camera. So you have your zoom ring, you have your focus ring, and then you have a customizable third ring here for adjustment. Now I map this to ISO so that I can adjust my ISO from the lens ring on the camera. This gives my left hand something else to do while my right hand is working on the rest of the camera. Adjusting ISO is not super easy on this camera considering the lack of buttons that are on it, and the only other option is going to the touchscreen. So mapping it to this lens ring here makes it really nice because I tend to kind of choose a shutter speed and stick with it based on what I'm shooting. And then based on the look that I'm going for, I will choose an aperture, and then I will feather my exposure in using the ISO, which is a little different than what some people do, but it's what works for me. And I like having that mapped to the control ring here because there is no other easy way to adjust ISO without remapping some other things on the back of the camera. And with doing that, you're changing functionality that you could have used another way, and maybe some of that functionality isn't as useful as having it adjustable up here. But there are other things that you can adjust from this ring here. You can customize the settings in the camera to do many things with that ring, and I'm sure as more updates come out, camera bodies with more features and stuff like that, there will be more options here. And I say that this is a thing that you should know about the EOS R because the lens platform, this is something that you can expect. If you are adapting lenses, maybe your existing Canon lenses, you're not going to have that functionality, but it is a feature of using the native lenses with the EOS body, the EOS R body, or the RP body itself. So number 6 is something that most people know, but I found it to be an interesting test over time, is that the camera uses the same battery that Canon has been using for a long time, and the battery life on this camera is actually really good. You would think a battery that's been out for so many years, quite a long time, with really no updates to it, would get a little old and it wouldn't have the battery longevity that you would expect out of a camera such as this, a camera that's much more electronic than cameras of the past. But the LPE6 battery lasts quite a while in this camera, and I found it to be quite pleasant to not only get to use batteries that I already had, because even though I haven't shot Canon in 5 years, I haven't owned a Canon camera body in quite some time, I still had extra batteries, and those batteries still work, and they still hold a good battery life as well. And so using those in this camera means that I don't have to buy a bunch of new batteries. The batteries that are still out are great, and there's even a lot of aftermarket options out there. So though the LPE6 battery has been out for a long time, the battery does a good job, and the price isn't too terrible on it. There are a lot of aftermarket batteries out there as well that are priced even better, that are of good quality, and you can run them in this camera. So that's definitely something that's not going to break your bank, getting a bunch of extra batteries for your Canon EOS R or EOS RP. So number 7 is that this camera doesn't have any internal body stabilization, so there's no IBIS on the camera, but there is an electronic stabilization option that you can use when shooting video, and I believe it's available when shooting photo too, but I've only tried using it in shooting video. The electronic stabilization happens digitally, which in the past, digital stabilization was lackluster. It just really felt fake and robotic, especially in video, when you're hand-holding the camera and shooting video, and there's like the stabilization is happening. You could really tell that there was something going on there that was digitally added. Obviously, you can't really tell stuff like that in photos, but in video you really can. But the electronic stabilization on this camera is actually great. what it does is it does crop in a little bit, and it handles all of that digitally. And most of the time, it feels really, really fluid. It doesn't feel fake. You can definitely, if you are really kind of shaking the camera a lot and not kind of helping the camera be steady, you could tell that there's something electronic going on there that just doesn't feel natural, but it's not super noticeable. And I'm glad that they put it in here as opposed to just not having a function at all that as far as stabilization goes. And of course, you can get lenses that have stabilization, such as this 24 to 105 f4 has stabilization, but if you pair that stabilization with the electronic stabilization inside the camera, you could shoot handheld 4K video all day long with this and have nice, smooth shots that feel good, and you don't have to have all the extra stuff along with you. You know, there's been a ton of camera gimbals coming out. Everybody's going with camera gimbals, but if you have a lens that has good stabilization and you're okay with relying on a little bit of crop and utilizing electronic stabilization, you can go handheld and have no problem at all. I definitely did that a lot, both with this lens and then with that 28 to 70, which I don't think has stabilization. I can't remember off the top of my head, but even then, just relying on the electronic stabilization definitely made my footage look much better than it would have otherwise. And so the electronic stabilization, though it's not as good as having something that's more optical, something that's more mechanical, that feels more natural, it's better than having nothing at all. And I think Canon did a good job of putting that in here, and I applaud them for putting it in the camera as opposed to just not putting anything at all, which definitely could have been easy, because people have complained saying electronic stabilization is just inherently bad. It crops in a little bit. Everybody's complained, but I don't think anybody's really given it a chance and used it and came out saying that they're glad that it's there as opposed to missing altogether. So in continuing to talk about video features, with the number 8 thing that you should know is that it does produce a 4K image, but it crops in. It doesn't actually utilize the entire sensor. Canon has came out and said that it's because of overheating issues. And yeah, there are cameras that utilize the entire sensor and have overheating issues because that entire sensor is being captured, and in the camera, it's digitally downsampling to 4K, which is good. You take that 6K image, squish it down into 4K, all those pixels get closer together, it produces a nicer image than if it just started out as a 4K image and was cropped and wasn't utilizing the entire sensor the way the entire sensor was designed to be used. But if you have to worry about overheating issues where your camera craps out after 10 minutes in heat in hotter situations, then what's the point in having full pixel readout anyways? So there's pros and cons there. If you're shooting in hotter environments, I don't mind the crop at all because I'd rather have the crop than have overheating issues. But in the ideal environment in a studio where everything's nice and cool and you don't have to worry about it, I would rather have full pixel readout without the cropping. I think we all could agree to that. There is also a 30-minute record limit on the camera, which is pretty standard on most cameras like this. Some of the Sony cameras now are coming with unlimited record times, but you still have the overheating issues sometimes and different issues that you'd run into there. I'm fine with a 30-minute limit. I think that's plenty of time on a camera like this. If you need more, you can run an external recorder such as an Atomos to get unlimited or as long as you have storage and battery life record time limits. But on this camera, 30-minute record limit, 4K cropped from the larger sensor. It's okay, I guess. It's better than nothing, but that's what it is when it comes to video. Otherwise, the camera does a great job recording video. It has the great Canon color science. It has log shooting options directly in body, so there's a lot going for it there. It just has those limitations of the 4K crop, 30-minute time limit. That's just where we're at right now with our technology. So number 9 is the multifunction touch bar that's on the back of the camera. Now, when I saw that at first, I thought, oh, awesome, a slider. That's great. I could map that to whatever. I could slide back and forth, but I've kind of found it to be maybe a little gimmicky at this point. It's very limited in its functionality because there are not a whole lot of things that you can map to it. Some people map their ISO to it, which I think is a good option. Of course, I'm using the ring on the front of the camera for ISO. But if I was adapting standard Canon glass to this camera, I would definitely utilize the touch bar for that. In video function, I will actually map this to adjusting the audio levels because I don't want to have to go into the menu to adjust audio levels, so I can actually map that and adjust my audio levels from the back. However, there's only certain times that you can adjust audio levels in the camera. You can't be recording, you can't be doing anything at all. The camera has to be in standby mode essentially in order for you to adjust the audio level. So that kind of makes it a little bit of a bummer there. You still have to go in the menu to do any on-the-fly adjustment there, but there are other things that you can map that to, but it is fairly limited. There's only a few options both in photo and video mode as to what you can map that to. So I'm hoping that future firmware updates will add functionality to the touch bar and give you, or the touch whatever it's going to be called. I know like a Mac has a touch bar, but that's kind of what I'm calling this. That bar essentially just doesn't have a whole lot of functionality yet. So I'm excited to see maybe what they'll do with it in the future, because it really, to me, seems like Canon has put all of their thought into their lenses, and their camera bodies themselves are lacking just a little bit. You know, they gave us that multi-touch here, but they took away a lot of other buttons that are on the camera. This camera has a very limited amount of buttons as far as like custom function buttons and stuff like that. I mean, I don't really think that there are any custom function. Oh, there's a manual function button up here, but there just really aren't any custom function buttons on the camera. You get that slider instead. And yes, you can map it to stuff, but you can't make it do too many different things. I would still rather have buttons that I can get to and access, like the Nikon Z6 has, like my Sonys have. They took a lot of buttons away from this camera and gave us that multifunction, which I don't think was quite a fair trade-off yet. So that's going to do it for my 10 things that you need to know about this camera, whether you are new to this camera line, maybe you're thinking about switching or upgrading to a Canon mirrorless or jumping ship from another camera manufacturer to try Canon mirrorless. I think there are some real benefits to switching to Canon mirrorless because they're just really putting a lot of time and effort into their lenses. Their lenses are just great, and I think that they're doing things that none of the other camera manufacturers are, which is going to put them and set them apart. So I'm really excited to see what Canon continues to do on this platform. So let me know what you think down in the comment section below. What's the thing that you think is most unique about the EOS R or this EOS mirrorless platform in and of itself? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Links to everything that I've mentioned are down in the description also. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for checking it out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and click like if you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you back here in the next one. Take care.